Okay, so we are discussing chapter 5. And the way that she opened this chapter up was it was a I don't even know how to explain it, but just opening it up, talking about how Barack Obama gave that speech at the church on Father's Day in Chicago, and basically using the same language that you would have from the other side or the ops to talk about Black men and Black families. That was really powerful. Because you think about, in a lot of situations, you have a lot of the go along to get along politicians, because they're trying to get to a certain level or a certain status. And I can acknowledge that in giving that speech, that's exactly what he gave the appearance of. How do you guys feel about that?
That's a tough one. I mean, it's hard for me to really understand, what was his motivation behind it, was
Right.
it a public appearance type thing where he knew maybe that it would be, told about in the media so that maybe it could get more white Americans behind him? Or was it trying, to reach Black men? I don't know, but I don't, it's hard for me as a white person to comment on that. I really don't know what his motivations were. I mean, it could go either way. And just talking about it without talking about the reasoning or the reasons why things are the way they are, to me, I don't see that how it helps.
Exactly.
But I think it kind of goes along for me with, did he kind of did what I think a lot of people do, is that there's so many negative stereotypes heaped upon, African American men, that a lot of times the conversation doesn't go deeper, about the systemic things and the issues that are in place. So I mean, that was also the section where she talked about that one study that said that African American men were more likely to be involved with their children, than other ethnic groups, even if they weren't with the mother or something, she said. But a lot of times I think the stereotypes and negativity feed upon themselves so much so that then we internalize it and we believe it. Because like she said, it's the same thing that Bill Cosby was going around doing too, right? Just saying that, we need these fathers to be here. And on the surface, it sounds really good, but then it's also very damaging when you don't explore it on a deeper level. You just have all these stereotypes and you just think that, Black men are absent. They don't want to be there for the children. They don't want to get married. All these things that we started internalizing, kind of believe ourselves.
Right.
I think too that it's really, really easy because of what you were talking about with that very, surface level conversation, that I don't even think that people are aware that they are perpetuating these stereotypes because they've been so ingrained into our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So even somebody as educated and as smart and as wonderful as Barack Obama was and is, might not have noticed that they were giving into a stereotype and not looking at it on a deeper level. Because, you know, he had a very different upbringing than a lot of Black men. So he may not have realized exactly what he was saying because he doesn't have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything you said is true. I agree with that. And also the fact that I think Yoshunda said it earlier about the going along to get along. I think because of where he was and the lack of support he had, based upon even with the position he had, the lack of support around him and the people that did not want him to be where he was, I think that he said that because he didn't want to be putting himself in a position where he walked on eggshells because as an African American president and just being an African American period, if he would have said something, the media would have twisted it as they always did.
Mm-hmm.
True.
And what would have happened as a result of that, it would have been utter chaos, and people would have, whether on purpose, for the most part, would have taken what he said out of context and used it against him. If he would have told the truth, kind of like when Minister Farrakhan was on Phil Donahue in the early 90s and how the
Mm-hmm.
audience was simply just taking what he was saying out of context rather than looking at the facts. Because for the most part, if you go back and watch that interview 30 years ago, Minister
Mm-hmm.
Farrakhan, for the most part, throughout the entire interview, did not say anything that was untruthful or unfactual. It
Mm-hmm.
was the audience perception behind what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I believe, if Barack Obama would have gone deeper into the root cause of why Black men are not as present as they should be, and many want to be, is because of the historic issues behind it. If he would have went more in depth explaining it from that perspective and still saying what he was saying, there would have been a lot more backlash,
Mm-hmm.
not just from Black people, but from white people and white supremacy as well, given where he was. So he was kind of walking, I think he was kind of walking on eggshells of what he was saying. And I don't think, even though he is not, even though he had a different upbringing than most African American men, there's still some level of awareness that he probably has, being as educated as he is regarding that.
You're
That's
right.
my outlook on that.
You're right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what all of you said. Um, I just think at the time, because of where he was trying to get, he did not want to challenge the status quo. Um, and I get it. I mean, I totally get it. If you're in that position, you have a certain uh goal that you're trying to achieve, it may be that you don't want to initially rock the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Because he did come out later and do a lot, um, or try to do a lot more with criminal justice reform as well.
It's just
So, what was
I
that,
think
Frank?
it's crazy that it just, I don't know if it's just us or it's just human nature, but we always talk about the problems, but we never talk about the reasons
Right.
for them. We only talk about you know, the drug problem, or even talking about criminal justice, talking about racism, talking about whatever we talk about. We only state the problem. We never talk about the reasons why the problems are there.
Right. The underlying issue.
Right, right. I mean, just even as simple as, okay, how Black people are viewed by racist white people. It's crazy to think that I've always heard, people talk about that stuff about raise yourself up by your bootstraps and all that. And I'm thinking to myself, do these people really believe that any ethnic group could all of a sudden come out of a situation like slavery one day? Okay, you're not slaves any longer, but so now you're free, but you have no job. You've been told, you've been kept from learning how to read or having an education, and you're just going to enter society and all of a sudden you're going to be on the same level as everybody else. No ethnic group that was in slavery could have done that.
And it's actually the same when people get released from prison.
Yes, yes, it is.
But I think the answer is that people do actually believe that.
That's
They
great.
think it's that simple. I remember having a conversation with someone one time, and she said, "Why do Black people just keep talking about slavery? Like it happened, move on." And we just had that conversation because she really did not get it. She
And
really
I
did.
think a lot of white people feel that way. Why are we still talking about it today? Because it is the root of the problem for a lot of the problems that we're having today.
It
It
is.
is. It is. There's just you can't say that it's not. And had it been white people that were enslaved, they would be in the situation Black people are in now.
Right.
It wouldn't be any different. They're not some smarter race that could have surpassed everything. And no,
You know
if
what's
it was us, we would have ended up in the same position. It's going to
exactly?
take how many hundreds of years did they have slavery in this country? It's going to take that many hundreds of years to get on the same level. It's
Probably
not.
more.
400.
Yeah.
So let me tell you something that frustrates me about what you just said, Francesca. How can you being a white person, how can you understand that? And we have black, and I know Black people I've had this discussion with that just don't have the understanding, but you understand it. That's what's frustrating to me. And you know
I've
what's
done a I've done a lot of reading, and besides that, when you grow up the way I grew up, your eyes are opened to a lot of things that I never would have known about had I grown up differently. If I would
well,
have grown up in a white neighborhood, going to a white school, I, I would be a very different person than I am today. Very different. And I know that. It's obvious to me because I mean, I haven't had the same experiences as other white people. And it shaped who I am. And I know that. And it's not all good experiences, but it definitely opens your eyes to reality. I had coworkers ask me when I first started working where I work now. Um, they actually asked me if, because they knew I was from Oakland and they knew that I had a different upbringing, they actually asked me if, straight up, if what Black people are saying is true about police brutality and stuff, or are they just complaining?
Wow.
And it took everything in me to like calm down, because it's my actual boss who is the mayor of the city also.
mm,
And I know she voted for Trump and I know she's upset right now. And I'm like, it's hard because being white, you will hear things that wouldn't be said in mixed company.
mm.
And I didn't hear these things until I moved to Southern California and was in a predominantly white environment. So I was like 31, I think, when I moved down here. Never heard anything like this. And then when you get there, and when they feel comfortable, when they think no one, has a different opinion, they'll say things. And for me, it's hard because I won't be quiet. In my job situation, it's hard because you have to say it in a way to make people not feel threatened. because they'll feel threatened. A lot of people feel threatened by me. I've been branded, what's the word, aggressive. And I don't think I'm aggressive. I'm a very, very nice person. I go out of my way for people all the time. But when you have a difference of opinion and you're not quiet about it, then you're aggressive. So I'm an aggressive person in my job, and it's kept me from being able to move up. But I don't really care because I'm not going to change who I am. You know, there's other people like me out there that have grown up and witnessed things and learned from it, you know, and it's really hard. I remember one time I was at this one job, totally different environment. I'd say it was a lower class level of people, all white though.
Hmm.
And we were sitting around because the power went out, but we had to stay there just in case the power came back on. And so we had nothing to do. And so one of the girls says, you know, we're all just sitting there talking and stuff. One of the girls was like, I want to tell this joke. And the reason she said this, because the one Black girl that worked there had just walked in. And she was like, I want to tell this joke, but I just want to see if everybody's cool with it because it's a Black joke. And so, yes. And so I was sitting there and I'm waiting for the Black girl to speak up and say, no, I don't want to hear it. And she didn't say nothing. And I was like, she's afraid to say something. That's what I'm thinking. And the girl gets ready to start telling this joke. And I was like, no, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. And she's like, no, it's really funny. No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. So move on to something else. And then later on, I'm in the bathroom and the Black girl's in there and she's like, you know what? Thank you. Thank you for speaking up. And I'm like thinking to myself, I wish she would have. But then again, it's better that she didn't and I did. Because then it lets people know, no, it's not just bad because she's here. It's bad, period. It's not just because she's here. And later on, I left my phone in one of the seats and forgot about it. And the girl that was going to tell the joke comes back and was like, oh, I found this phone. And she looks at the screensaver and she was like, it's got a little Black girl on it. And I'm like, yeah, that's mine because my daughter is Black. And I'm like, that's my phone. Thank you. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, it's hard for me because I'll get opinions of other people. And to me, she's the epitome of trailer trash. And then you want to sit here and joke about something you have no knowledge of. And it's just experiences like this that are going to make me different because who experiences stuff like this? Who grew up? I mean, I was the only white person in our whole neighborhood. I mean, my family was in our whole neighborhood. And I lived in Oakland growing up in the 70s when the Black Panthers were, you know, very prominent. And I got to experience being a minority. And that changes who you are when you experience that, because it doesn't matter if you're Black, white, Mexican, it doesn't matter. If you're a minority, you're going to have different experiences than someone who is not. Mm. And they're not all going to be good, but they will open your eyes to reality. And that's how I've, you know, besides that and reading, doing a lot of reading on my own, you know, by different people, you know, and different, you learn. And it's going to take a lot of education and a lot of people wanting to open their eyes to reality, because I think a lot of people don't want to. They don't want to know the truth. They don't want to see it. They would rather think it's, you know, this everything's great and people are just complaining, but there's no truth in it. Because once they realize there's truth in it, then they no longer feel comfortable anymore.
Mm.
Sorry
So
about
what do you guys?
taking up
No, no,
everything with
no,
Now, I was
no.
gonna
That
say,
was
yeah, go ahead, Yoshunda.
no. I think that that was a great segue
Hmm.
uh into what we're talking about next, as far as the numbers that she gave out, talking about people being in states of denial about where all the black men are.
hmm
Hmm.
Um, either feigning ignorance or actually being ignorant that right now more African American males are under correctional control as far as in prison or jail or on probation or parole than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began. So do they know or they're pretending not to know?
Well, I definitely did not know before I started reading. Um, I mean, I think that a lot of people just don't look up from their regular life.
hmm
It's really easy to be in denial and just not look. Like you get, occasionally you're told that, you know, um, a ridiculous number of black men are incarcerated, etc. But until you actually stop and look at the numbers and stop and listen and not use your daily life as an excuse to be ignorant of what's going on, like I would not have realized that so many black men are incarcerated and then their lives and their livelihood are completely taken from them afterward. You don't recover from being incarcerated.
I think people know, but they believe that if you're there, you did something to deserve to be there. That's what I think.
But I think that that's the lie that keeps you from looking at the numbers. That face value lie is what keeps you from going, oh, maybe I should educate myself or look this up or be more aware. So I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we talked about that last week too. That's the cycle that just continues. So if George Floyd had not done something, then it would not have led to this. And it's always that victim
hmm
blaming that we engage in that just
hmm
happens over and over again. And I think we talked about it too with Ahmaud Arbery. How they went back and kind of tried to pull out all this dirt on him and from his past that had nothing to do with him being, chased down and murdered that day. But, that's what we see. Like, that's the message that we get all the time. And I think about um, African Americans and especially Black men is that, there's just some kind of character flaw there,
hmm
that's innate. And that's the cyclical thing that we just get, into. And it's just so hard to break away from.
Yep.
Okay. She talks about the reason why that type of denial might exist, like Katie was referring to earlier. Um, it can be because we're so used to the racial segregation that we have in housing and schools, um, the racism in politics, the media imagery, and it's so easy for us to get caught up in other things like constantly being on, you know, social media as far as, Instagram, TikToking, and all of that. And us being able to change the channel so easily when things make us uncomfortable, that we're
hmm
not, forced to deal with the issues. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'm late. I think my name says Yoshunda, but I'm Nandi. But I'm sorry
Because
that
you're
I'm
logged
late.
into my account
I
still.
okay. I gotta figure out how to log out. I'm so slow. I
I was
just had.
getting notifications from your students today, like such and such is
Oh, really?
logged into Zoom. I
Oh
was like,
no,
what?
I gotta. I thought it would automatically log me out. I'm not too computer savvy, but I'm sorry. I know I'm supposed to be leading this, and I just had like a crazy day.
It's okay.
Um,
I
so
just
my
asked the
apologies.
last question. So if y'all want to answer that, and then Nandi, you can take over.
Oh, thanks. Um, but no, you were talking about, you said, what do we think about that? And I
Mhm.
think I was just thinking about the section when she talked about the book called States of Denial by Stanley Cohen, and how the denial that, like the collective denial that we see as a culture, is kind of facilitated by this caste system that we have. And I think the idea that we don't have to be confronted with these kind of undesirable things, so that, the first time I ever went to a prison or a jail was when I was in grad school and I was working on a story. And someone that I knew from high school I thought might be in jail, and he was. I think I might have mentioned this last week, but that was the first time I'd ever been to a jail. So it's kind of like it's out of my purview. It's out of my life in terms of a daily basis. I don't have to deal with having, cousins or brothers that are in and out of jail. They've had run-ins with the police, but nothing to where it was like a big part of my life. So unless I'm going to get emboldened by the injustice just like on my own as a journalist, like how deep do most people
Mm-hmm.
go into this kind
Yeah.
of issue? Because if it's not affecting your life, like if my father was incarcerated my whole life, maybe, and I felt like he had been unjustly convicted or given some ridiculous sentence, I might be fired up to start a group and activist,
Mhm. Mhm.
to fight for rights of inmates. But if it's not your personal situation, I think because life is so, just like me falling off tonight and getting the time wrong and doing all that, I think life is so complicated and hard that it's hard to take on these issues to a great degree. Like, there's the injustice, there's too many Black men in prison, that it's racially based. But I think for a lot of people, even myself, you kind of feel like your hands are tied. You're like, well, what can I do? What can I do to really, I could post facts on my Facebook page, right? I could post facts from the book and let people know, these are the statistics about Black men and, blah, blah, blah. But what is that really going to do? So I think that most people turn a blind eye because either the problem is too insurmountable in their mind, or it's not affecting them on a personal level.
One thing though, even when it does affect you on a personal level, just from my own experience, it seems like you start to feel like that's the norm. That's just how it is. That's the norm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I've been to plenty of jails to visit people, prisons and county, and
Mm-hmm.
it's um it gets to be like a routine. It gets to be like a
Mm-hmm.
routine.
Right.
And just the whole, even just by visiting, you're treated in such a way to where it makes you feel like you might be a criminal too. you know
Mm.
just but even by visiting, they treat you from the moment you walk in a different kind of way, not respectful.
Right. Ah.
They're talking to you in a voice like of authority, like sit there, go here, fill this out. It's not like
It's not friendly
anything.
or polite.
No, 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 no. So you're already starting to internalize that and starting to feel like there's something wrong with you for even going to visit. But then,
Mm.
and then if you're visiting people, it becomes, just normal. Like,
Right.
it's just
Right.
normal that, everybody you grew up with was in jail at some point. You know, it's just normal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you don't look
Mm-hmm.
back at it till much later, if at all, and see there's something wrong with that.
Right.
How can every single person you grow up with have had something to, and these are people, it's not, all those people aren't bad. There's
Right.
plenty of people that were in the gifted program and were very smart And, but, whatever, you start to feel that it's normal.
Uh,
Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who've, like for you, you visited when you were in grad school, and it might have been that once or twice or however many times you took to interview him, but that was your
Yeah.
only experience.
right.
Whereas you might, in certain environments, you might be going to visit several different people over times in your life.
Right.
And it just starts to feel normal. Like that's just the way it is. Accept it.
What did you guys think about? I might be going back to an earlier part in the chapter, but I found it interesting when they were talking about the black male being absent, the whole section about Obama's speech and him kind of chastising the black man for kind of abandoning his family.
Yeah,
And
we started off
did
with
you
that one.
talk about that? Okay.
Yeah, we started off with that one.
Okay, well, let me go forward. What do you think about the these different phases that they talked about with the war on drugs, and do they seem calculated with the roundup and how they go into the community, the police interrogate the people, then all of a sudden they get arrested. Then the second phase is then they get convicted. So then they usually get a harsher sentence and they're serving out their time. And then they talked about the third phase being this phase of like invisible punishment, almost the period of invisible punishment. So then when they talk about the unique set of criminal sanctions that are imposed on individuals after they step outside the prison gates. Because it seems to me, my opinion, I wanted to see what everyone else thought. Like that seems like the phase that could be addressed in terms of even like legislation or things like that, in terms of decriminalizing someone after they've served their time. Because the other steps are kind of like, to me, harder to address in a way. But I didn't know what everyone else thought.
I think it just seems it seems too coincidental to not be a plan and a motivation behind the steps, especially the last one. Because if it's all about rehabilitation, all about people re-entering society and really giving them a chance to, get their life together, then why would we have all these sanctions and different, strict laws and this and that that's
Right.
leading to people going back? It does seem calculated. It's horrible to think about it like that, but it does, because if we're truly trying to have them re-enter society, we would have things in place to ensure that happens if we really wanted them to. So,
Well, in my own community, it's very obvious that roundups only happen in our poor communities, because I know that there are drug dealers that live in Third Ward. And I know that there are plenty of white people who know judges and lawyers and commissioners who smoke pot on a very regular basis in almost in public situations. And they aren't going to jail. The cops aren't coming to our neighborhood in, 4 or 5 cars deep.
Right.
And so the only time we ever hear about that is when it's across the railroad tracks. We have literal railroad tracks in Griffin. And that line has been there forever. Like, you can look up the historical maps and you can see that Black people and white people have been divided. I mean, you can even look up the information from our police department on how the cops police the Black side of town, but not the white side of town.
Right.
And because I see people all the time, oh, I'm booze cruising today in my golf cart. Now let some Black people on the other side of the tracks go around in a golf cart with some alcohol in their tumbler and see what happens. So, and going to Griffin High School, I saw it all the time. The Black kids were targeted, and right now we're having an issue in Griffin currently with excessive force on people of color that go to Griffin High School, and it's been that way.
These are
So
kids.
there are so many examples of it. So, and then these people, like, they're gonna ruin this 18-year-old girl's life, ruin it, because some cop was undertrained to de-escalate a situation. So, yeah, it's obvious.
I thought it was really obvious in terms of the whole breakdown they did of Chicago. They she kind of tied it back into Obama and Chicago as this vibrant, culturally diverse city. And then when she breaks down the numbers in terms of this drug war starting, or supposed war on drugs starting in the 1980s, and the numbers and the statistics that you see, I mean, she was talking about how it just becomes an engine of mass incarceration. 90% of the sentences were for drug offenses in Illinois, and they were African Americans. Just crazy numbers in terms of what they're doing. They said that annually, those sent to prison for drug crimes increased by almost 2,000%, from 469 in 1985 to 8,755 in 2005. So that's just a crazy number. That's a crazy statistic. I don't see how this is going. I mean, I don't know whose job it is to fight this on a massive level. I guess it's political, right? Is it political? Because I guess the DA, they're trying to get convictions for their position. So they don't really care about reform, I don't think. I think their jobs are wedded to being able to say, they're protecting the community. But it just seems so obvious from her numbers that this was just a way to lock a bunch of Black men up.
Right.
And it feels like, when I look at the pictures of Black men, and I don't know really what my comment is on this, but this is just me free flowing. When I look at pictures of Blacks post, the right before like the civil rights, we're talking like in the 40s or 50s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. And you see how we're always dressed in suits, very put together, very professional looking. Everyone just looks very together and like they care about presenting a certain kind of image, And I think that there was like a different kind of hope then, and almost in terms of, we're going to present to you, we're going to show you that we don't deserve to be treated as second-class citizens, that we deserve to live in nice areas. We're happy to have our own communities. We want a good education for our kids and our families. And even them talking about it's the Black men that they find that even if they weren't with the mom, were more involved in their kids' lives. So when they give you the statistics, African-American women being unmarried, as a Black woman who's unmarried, maybe partially by choice, I don't know. But it's like, you have to look at that. You're like, they're tearing apart our community and breaking down our family, to me, from that of what it was, where we were presenting ourselves a certain way, where we had a certain kind of hope and drive for the future. And I think there was kind of an implosion of that after civil rights, in terms of us adopting the stigma, wearing the baggy jeans, hanging out on the corner, and kind of being like, F it. If you guys are going to treat us like this, then we'll just go ahead and sell some crack, and we'll go ahead. Some of us are doing that. We're doing that in the 80s. We might have been targeted by the police, but they were out there doing it. You know what I mean?
That's what
we
I
can't say.
Yeah, that's what I had to say when I was reading that too. Like, for some reason, I don't know why, but she was just a lot of times coming across like everybody was innocent. Right. But we do have to acknowledge that it wasn't always the case. Go ahead.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's not they're not innocent. And I think there's a fine line between kind of just focusing on the numbers and knowing that something that's the whole catch 22 to me. Knowing that something unfair is going on, but also knowing that some bad behavior and some bad choices are going on. Because uh everyone has to have that mentality kind of just in your moral fiber of I don't want to do something that's going to destroy my own community, that's going to destroy my own people. When I would see some of the guys selling crack to some of these people who just looked effed up, I'm just like, morally, how can you do that? I know you're making some money, but how can you feel okay with that? And don't you know the energy that comes with doing something like that? You know what I mean? For
Yeah.
profit only. And so I feel like we adopted that broken down mentality to some extent of I'm not going to try my hardest anymore. I am going to cut class and hang out on the corner. I am going to dress in baggy clothes and make myself an easy target for the police. An easy target. We didn't do it in a sophisticated way. The masses of these guys that were getting rounded up, it wasn't sophisticated.
Mm.
And that's
Mhm.
why they were getting rounded up like that.
But
So I think they're,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry, I don't want to rant, but
No,
I
no,
have
I,
not.
I
I'm
agree
sorry.
with you up until a certain extent. I feel like, did you adopt it or was it pushed on you? Because what happened between the civil rights movement and even before that in the 40s and the 50s, which in Oakland, there was a lot of migration from the South of Black families, and they were buying houses in my neighborhood. When I grew up in the early 70s, every house on that block was owned by a Black family who had been there since like the 40s and 50s when there were jobs available for them at like
Mhm.
the Port of Oakland and Richmond and stuff like that. So, what happened from that time until Reagan's war on drugs that
Mhm.
accelerated because it wasn't like that before? And if anybody's read anything about Gary Webb from the San Jose Mercury News and him uncovering this not plot, I guess you can call it a plot, but it was executed and went just fine, of drugs being pushed into those areas and changing the whole dynamic of what was going on in those areas. And he proved it, wrote a whole article about it, and then apparently committed suicide by shooting himself in the head twice. How
Twice.
you, yes, look it up. Gary Webb from the San Jose Mercury News. He won a
Okay.
Pulitzer Prize, and then they took it back and said he made everything up. And then later on, now it's come out that everything he wrote about was true about the drugs being pushed into these communities. Yeah, and he committed suicide. They ruined his career, and then eventually, yeah, supposedly he committed suicide by shooting himself in the head twice.
Yeah, actually, she talks about that in the beginning of the book, how the CIA was complicit
Mm-hmm.
in these drugs getting into the communities because they were choosing to ignore the fact because they were funding these Nicaraguan, basically guerrilla armies,
Mm-hmm.
um, in order to achieve the goal that they wanted at the time.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted to go back when we were, well, Nandi, you were referring to, we were talking about did it become a choice at some point? So I want to read something that someone posted on Facebook from my hometown when we were discussing how people were so up in arms about not supporting Joe Biden because of the crime bill.
Mhm.
So this is what he said. He said, from 1991 to 1993, I accumulated two burglaries, one in Griffin, and while out on bond, caught another one in Clayton County, which gave me 3 years in Griffin and 5 in Clayton County. So when I was released in 1994, I heard rumblings about the crime bill. 3 strikes law, getting convicted of the same crime 3 times, you can get life. So me knowing that I'm already on 2, I had one of 2 choices. Either keep trying my luck or sit my ass down, and I chose the latter.
Mm.
So, and he wasn't just involved in burglaries too. He was involved in the whole drug game, but of course you're not going to say that on,
Facebook.
on Facebook.
It might not be the
But-
best
right,
choice.
right. So I'm just thinking for some people, they chose not to keep doing the same things. Some others may not have felt like they had that choice and may have been in a situation where they didn't, which we also talked about the ones that got caught up, who
Mhm.
were actually innocent.
Mhm.
Um, but I do believe that at some point, if you know they're going to try to railroad you, at what point do you bow out gracefully? You
Mm.
know?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you know, that's
Mhm.
probably, it's just so complicated though, Yoshunda, because like you said, what does that look like for him? Did he have options or supports that other people didn't have? It's
Right.
just so, and I think that's the point of all this, and that's good why we discuss it, is that it's just all such a big jumbled ball. And so
Mhm.
we can point to one person and say, yeah, he did, he said he chose to sit down and get his life together. And that's true, because we do believe in personal responsibility and all this, as well. We each have to, you know we have to be accountable for our own selves. But like I said too, what was it, about his life too, that I would want to know, what did that look like, and why was he able to make that choice, and somebody else felt like maybe they didn't have that choice. I don't know.
Well, it's a trip when you think about how hand in hand the war on drugs came with defunding of programs in the cities, programs that help kids. I remember being young and being involved in the swim team in the ghetto. They had each park. A lot of the parks had like a public pool, and they would have like swim teams, and you would go to different parks and have a swim meet once a week. And I mean, things like this, they don't have that no more. They don't have that. They may still have that public pool, but they don't have these teams anymore. And it was all like volunteer based. I know that the coaches weren't getting paid, because the kids that went, they couldn't even, I mean, we didn't have like uniform, like the matching swimsuits, like a uniform or anything like that. And we didn't have, it was just a basic program just that they had at arts and, at the recreation centers, and kids could do that. They could go after school and they could do, like arts and crafts, and they could be on like a baseball team, and they could, and all of these things were they made it cheap enough to where, or even free a lot of the times, to where kids could be involved in other stuff. And when I look back on it, the ones that were involved were the ones that, even if they did have trouble with the law at some point, eventually they got out of that, and it's like, if you're taking away all the programs and you're starting this war on drugs all at the same time, it's going to lead to what it led to. And was it calculated? I don't know. It seems like it. Because why would you want to take away the positive things?
Right.
Because those things really did have a positive impact on people.
There's some people that believe that this war on drugs was started in response to, the civil rights movement and
I
the
can
gains
believe
that were
that.
made in the civil rights movement, and that it was a Republican Party strategy known as the Southern Strategy to get tough on crime and welfare and appeal to poor working class whites in the South that were uncomfortable about the gains that African Americans had made during the civil rights movement. Because affirmative action created this illusion that Black Americans were, we were just leapfrogging and getting all the best jobs and, taking everything away. And there's a quote from President Richard Nixon's former chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, where he said the whole problem is the blacks. The key is to devise or create a system that recognizes this while not appearing to. And to
Yeah.
me, that system is mass incarceration.
Yeah, but in combination, taking away all those programs that were there to give kids something to do, to teach them something else, that was the precursor to the war on drugs too, because when they're younger, they'd be involved in these programs. But if you don't have the programs when they're younger, what are they doing? You know, and it's just crazy because
They were all
where did all the drugs come from? Like, it wasn't in the community, not like that. And then all of a sudden, it's like so prevalent. How did it get there?
well,
You know
that's
what I
what
mean?
they too, is that the drug war has never been about rooting out the source of the drugs.
Mm-mm.
Where are the drugs? How are the drugs getting into the community? And they had federal funds flowing to states and cities that were boosting the highest numbers of drug-related arrests. So there was an incentive for the cities, you know what I mean? States and local authorities were rewarded millions of dollars for increasing the number of drug-related arrests. So, I mean, it seems like a targeted effort in terms of what I see. A targeted
Right.
effort.
Definitely targeted.
Definitely accurate. I mean, I found it also really interesting when they talked about the drunk driving part. And that was another, to me, really interesting parallel to where they were giving the numbers of the people who were killed in drunk driving related accidents as compared to like someone who gets arrested for with a piece of crack and gets a mandatory 5-year sentence. You know? And someone who gets drunk driving might get like a day or 2 days in jail. It's like, how do you distinguish these? I don't know how you make these distinctions. What did you guys think about that?
I mean, at the end of the day, sorry I was late. At the end of the day, whenever the prison system was privatized, it became about the money. And the only way the government can continue to make money is to have bodies in those beds. So ultimately, I do think that it is planned because it's literally supporting that system. You've got to structure it, you've got to have bodies in the beds. That way you can make sure that you're getting the check. And if minimum sentences are taken away, I think that is going to lead to, I don't know what it's going to lead to, but I think like that's a big part of it. But that is part of Biden's plan. Like he has said that he plans to eliminate minimum sentences. That was one of the things whenever he, I know it was wrong whenever I did it back in the 90s. I didn't realize it was wrong then, but now that I know better, whatever. So I think that like now we just have to hold him accountable for that. Like we have to stay on him because I agree with, I think it was Nandi that said that the easiest thing to do is going to be able to probably decriminalize once their sentence is done. And there was a move years back about removing the felony box off of applications. And I think like that is the first step, because once you have served your sentence, you have to be able to rehabilitate, because otherwise you're not in a position like Yoshunda's friend who, had made those 2 mistakes and had an opportunity to, get out of the streets, because sometimes people are doing it to survive. So I think that the government knows that. I think that they are fully aware, and I do think it is fully calculated, because if you position somebody in a certain way, they are inevitably going to do things that allow you to fill those beds and get that check.
Everybody else quiet.
Everybody's
Well,
quiet.
I thought that one of the interesting points in this chapter were how prison populations are counted as the population of a county or a state, yet the prisoners are not allowed to vote.
Right.
It kind of stunk of a 3/5 compromise. I thought that it was very interesting that they, they count toward your population, but incarcerated people are not allowed to vote, and then they're not allowed to vote after they're out either. And I thought that the connection between how, if you have a prison in a white county, all the prisoners get counted, and all that does is give the white vote more power without Black people or people of color or marginalized people being able to vote. I thought that was pretty nasty.
DeAndre, were you saying something?
No, I was not. I was just listening to what Catherine was
Oh,
saying.
okay. I thought I heard something.
I mean, that just goes back into that need to fund the system. And I mean, she's blatantly said it, that this is the new non-racist way to be racist, because you're not directly tying it to anything, but like we know, we talk about the strong language, we talk about, the scenarios, the limited exposure, the removal of programs to help to fill that void and to bridge that gap. Like I know, like somebody was talking about Chicago. I told you guys, whenever I taught there, I made it an extra credit assignment for my kids to go down to Michigan Avenue and see things like Grant Park and the Bean, free museums, like the Chicago Art Museum is free to Chicago public school students. But my kids had never been, despite the fact it was a $2.15 10-minute train ride. They had it so ingrained that they didn't belong there, that they didn't go there. And I think that that mentality and that mindset is perpetuated by the war on drugs and the fact that you can see a difference in my community and the way it's policed versus another community. Like all of that stuff mentally wears and tears. Like, this is where I belong. And, whenever I first got on, they were talking about how things are normalized. And I think like that's really what we're dealing with. Like, systemic racism is so ingrained that it is normal. And, they were talking about it during we were talking about it, I don't remember if it was this book or the last one, but just kind of that idea that, racism is so embedded in America that whenever you are against racism, you're against America. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we're up against at this point.
That's very true.
Mm-hmm.
What we're talking about, I think, is illustrated. I did think that no one really commented on it, but I think that it was really good illustration in terms of her talking about the drunk driver movement that starts in the end of the 1980s. And she cites that particular bus accident, I guess, that happened in Kentucky, where 27 people died. And then Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD, was launched. And I kind of remember, when I think back to that time, the whole drunk driving hype picking up, and you hearing about it more in the news and in the media after these kind of tragic incidents or situations occurred. But when you think about the fact that drunk drivers at the end of the 1980s were responsible for 22,000 deaths, while overall alcohol-related deaths were close to 100,000 a year, which is a pretty big number. And there's always been kind of this distinction that I found interesting between the criminalization of marijuana as this horrible drug and all the arrests that were being made for that in comparison to alcohol, which, if you think...
Didn't Oregon just make crack legal and heroin?
Well, legal, I think they decriminalized it so that the people...
I'm sorry. I just had to throw that in there.
Right. They did. But I think that was, I'm actually, I don't know how I totally feel about it, but I think they're decriminalizing it so that people can actually not just do prison time.
Or go get treatment. Yeah, go to treatment.
Or get clean needles or get what they need, because I think having an out of control drug addiction is a health issue. You're not
right.
You have a physical
Right.
Probably
That's my point is I just can't understand why this didn't happen a long time ago. It just
right, right. That's what I mean. Like, but I think it was culturally is what I'm saying. I think that
yeah.
if you look across the board in suburbs and communities like that, or even white friends I have, drinking is a big part of their culture. I mean, people here in Saudi want to go drive to Bahrain just so they can drink for the weekend. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
serious, and for me, that's not my press,
Right.
to have a drink. I'm cool. I can wait.
Right. Right.
It's kind of culturally, you're just like what people are more drawn to. So they criminalized marijuana for so long, and we're locking up people for something that now they're legalizing in a lot of
Right.
states.
Once it became a Caucasian type
Right.
thing.
Oh, they're doing it, in the suburbs too. I think they were always doing it.
Yeah,
And
they
maybe
always were. Yeah, they always were.
well, I don't know why they decided to finally be okay with it, but um, it's just it's interesting to how you know they said 1900s marijuana was perceived rightly or wrongly as a drug used by blacks and Mexican Americans.
Right.
Leading to the Boggs Act of the 1950s, penalizing first-time possession of marijuana with a sentence of 2 to 5 years. Can you imagine? I can't imagine that.
Well, I mean, somebody was talking a few weeks ago about having a friend who preferred to hang out with his white friends because he knew he wouldn't get in trouble for doing the same things. And I think like that just goes back to the mentality that whenever white kids, try weed, they're just being teenagers and experimenting to see what happens. Whereas when black kids do it, they're thugs and they're criminals and this is their nature. We have to stop them now.
Right.
And I think she talked about that in the beginning of the book too, when you talked about the changes that were recently made in the Midwest in terms of drugs. But, they said like in the early 80s that was the actual focus, making it more of a public health issue versus criminalizing it. And then once we switched to this war on drugs, that's when our whole thing switched to, it's on crime and crime is bad and we got to clean up the streets. And we took the focus off of it, but yet we had the example of Brazil, 20, 30 years ago, where they did the same thing and went to treatment instead of punishment and have had great success. And I think I heard that recently that someone actually brought up Brazil as using them, as an example of what to do. So we've known this, we've known what to do, but we've chosen, like you said, to criminalize a certain group of people.
When we look at the where she talks getting towards the end of the chapter about how the economic collapse of inner city Black communities could have inspired a national outpouring of compassion and support in terms of the nation wanting to build up these communities, again. I think that's an amazing idea to have a new war on poverty because it doesn't have any kind of racial barrier to people getting behind wanting to have a war on poverty, and supporting or developing programs like Frankie was talking about with, how you could take swimming lessons. I mean, a war on poverty speaks to better education, better facilities, after school programs, job training, things like that. Because I think all factory jobs, which is what I think a lot of immigrants or Black Americans were getting into, working to support their families if they couldn't get into like university or something like that. All of that's gone now. And so there has to be a creation of something else. I don't know how skilled a lot of these Black men are when they get out of prison in terms of what their possible job prospects could be. And I think there's a part we're not talking about where maybe they've gotten used to a certain kind of lifestyle through being involved in the drug game. And I mean, anybody knows from if you're wealthy and you lose all your money, or, you know, you've been in business or something like that, or you had a wonderful home and you got caught up in the housing game and you lost your home and you had to downsize, all of those kind of things can be very traumatic and like a big adjustment that people don't. I always say it's much easier to adjust to having money than to not having it. You know, if you get a whole bunch of money, all of a sudden you instantly, people like, oh, wow, she looks amazing. You start looking better. You start smiling all the time. You got your new little outfits on. You smell good when people see you. It's like, wow. You know, but when you don't have money, the stress and the pressure of trying to take care of yourself or the people you love or your children, or even having enough money for gas, bridge toll, getting around, all of a sudden your car breaks down. You need a new carburetor and you don't have the money. And now, you know, the choices you make are going to be maybe not so good. So I wonder what you guys thought about if that could be a possibility, like a war on poverty. Like she talked about.
I don't know if anybody is that bold.
Um,
I was gonna say it's gonna take a left-leaning president, Congress, and Senate to get that passed because
Right. That's not gonna be, and that's not gonna be Joe Biden.
no,
Right.
Joe's not gonna do it.
No, he's not that. He's not that far left. I'm telling you, they already having an argument about picking more centrist people for his cabinet. So, yeah, that's not going to be something he's going to attack.
Well, he's going to have a problem in general because of not having. He's still got Mitch McConnell in charge over there, and he's going to have a hard time getting stuff passed because it's not going to.
Hopefully, we can change that January 5th in Georgia and get those 2 Senate seats.
Yeah, that would, you know, that should be on everybody's agenda out there right now.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be hard without having. I mean, people don't. They're not. It's like they're so focused on party that it doesn't matter what the legislation is. They're not going to vote for things that are going to benefit everybody per se. They only, you know, they're going to, you know, try to keep stuff from getting passed just because it's not what their particular party is pushing. And I don't know how anything is going to get, you know, changed if you have people like that. Because it really shouldn't even be. I don't even know why we have Democrats and Republicans. It really shouldn't be. Everybody should just be independent. You know, because some things you're going to agree with and some things you aren't, regardless, you know, of what party you are. And people should be voting for stuff based on how they feel morally and not just because, oh, I'm a Democrat, so Democrats are backing this, so I need to vote for this, or Republican, I'm a Republican, so I should be voting for this. It shouldn't be based on that. And I mean, having 2 parties and people voting just by party lines is making it real difficult to get anything done.
Right.
But I think there does need to be a war on poverty, because that's gonna, if it was, you know, truly, if people truly backed it, it would change a lot. You know, I mean, go ahead.
Finish your statement, because I have a question I would like for you all to answer.
Well, I was just going to say how Nandi was saying about the whole having money and things like that. Yeah, there's a need to have it right away, and that's why I think a lot of people do what they do. But what they don't realize is, especially when they get wrapped up in that drug game, selling drugs, is that they still have to put money back into it to then keep selling. You know, the actual profit they're making isn't as much as they think it is. And if they had a job, that's all profit, basically. You know what I mean? You get to keep that whole check. You're gonna have to pay for rent, but you have to pay for rent and everything else, regardless of what you're doing. But the media has made people think that they need to, look a certain way and have this and have that. And I think that has pushed, along with everything else, along with the war on drugs, along with the taking away of the programs and stuff. You put all that stuff together, especially with the media, and that gets people's mentality where it is today.
Well, they also promote drug use in the culture, in the music and the
Mhm.
songs. Sometimes the artists themselves don't even use the drugs, but they're in their songs talking about it as if they, and I think that's calculated. I think that you at the party and you're hearing about popping Molly or doing this, or in your mind, you can't help but go, huh, what's Molly? What does
Yeah, it
that
must
do?
be okay if, if they're doing it, must be okay.
So I think, and then the whole idea of wanting to emulate someone that you see is successful and famous and kind of do what they do, and they might not even be doing it.
Yeah. So I
That
wanted,
is very true. Because a lot of them don't live the lifestyle that they talk about, period. Whether it's the being involved in gangs, take what's his face, for example, Takashi 6ix9ine. They don't really live that life that they're portraying, but they make everybody else think that they do, and they want to follow that.
I wanted to ask a question addressing the war on poverty, but so the question, but let me make a statement first. You notice that throughout the years, whether it's been the war on drugs or war on crime, that the more emphasis has been placed on both of these things, the more damage is done to the people that is effectively, it's done more damage than it has helped people. So I'm wondering if there was a war declared on poverty, what kind of damage would that do to people? And this is not my question. This is just a hypothetical question that I'm asking answer for, and a rhetorical question. What I wanted to ask is, number one, what causes poverty? Number one, what causes poverty? And should there really be a war on poverty, given the fact that the more emphasis the media and people that get involved place upon the war on anything, the worse it becomes? But you definitely answer the question. What causes poverty?
I think that there's
Really,
I think myriad
unemployment is
causes
one.
poverty. Yeah, unemployment. I think also what you're born into. They talk about these caste
Mhm.
systems. You're born into a family that's living on Section 8, or your mom doesn't have she have a GED and she's working at, Quick Stop. You're going to be born, you're going to be poverty. You're going to be in poverty because the inflation and the system of capitalism, which is all about profit, it doesn't allow people, I don't think, the opportunity anymore to stay afloat unless they just are, and have really good, maybe I think that a lot of things people don't talk about is that a lot of Caucasian people are given a leg up in terms of inheritance or just family money. So they move to New York, they've got a rent control apartment through their aunt. They move somewhere, they've got their parents just setting them up when they get there. You know what I mean? Like, here's the first month's rent. So those are things I didn't even think about when I was younger. It was like, it's on you to do it.
Right.
My life was always like, I'm okay, I'm maintaining, but if anything hit me, it would derail me because I'm not coming from a foundation of having some nice savings account. Or my daughter who went to school with these people who have inherent, trust funds when they turn 18 because their dad owns a winery. So, when they turn 18, they've just got a stack of money waiting. All of that makes you more free in terms of your choices, your life choices, even what you dream of or think about doing, because you're not thinking about survival. You get out of that basic mode of food, shelter, and can I just make it? You know what I mean? You're not thinking about, when you have, and sometimes I'm not going to say that can't lead to other issues because it does. Nothing's perfect. But if you don't have a parents who are educated, who have saved money to help you have a leg up in life when you get out to be 18, and they have that hardcore Black mentality of it's 18 and it's time for you to go, where you don't know. You're just now all of a sudden you're 18 and it's all on you. And you're kind of like, wait a second. I wasn't ready for this. You know what I mean? So a lot of times I think people just don't have a foundation, even if they have drive and even if they have goals of things they're going to go strive to achieve in terms of college or junior college. You know, a lot of people get out and go, okay, I'm going to go get my AA degree because I can't, either I wasn't ready for a university or I can't afford it. So they go to the JC and they get a little part-time job, but they're still having trouble making ends meet. It's a very like month to month. They said that most people don't have much in their savings account. And to me, that's what leads to poverty, because anytime life throws you a curveball, some kind of hospital visit where you've got a whole bunch of hospital bills because somebody got in an accident or got sick or got some kind of cancer, or some kind of drug thing and somebody you know got locked up and you're trying to help bail them out or help them get on their, you know, anything, all those things hit people who are coming from a, you know, a lower level of income harder than someone who's got millions. The person who has millions has other issues, but you know, in terms of poverty, that's what I think causes it. Starting behind and trying to come up and having the regular curveballs of life hit you. And you can't stay afloat. You fall under, you know, you lose your apartment. You know, you lose your job. They downsize and you go to work and they tell you this is your last day.
Yeah.
And you know.
I would agree. It's like a lack of exposure and awareness too. And I think Nandi, you kind of hit it a little bit, but like, even if you're the first person in your family to go to college, like my mom didn't go to college, but I was able to go to college, but there's still other people, and not just white people, but, you know, even some of my Black friends that, you know, their parents had gone to college. There's an awareness there about how to navigate things and professions that you just don't have, that you're just trying to figure out. And so you always feel like you're trying to catch up. So when you go, and even when you get your first job, you may not know how important it is to network, or, you know, attend certain things, or, you know, be connected in certain groups or activities. You just know to go to work,
Right.
work hard and come home. And so there is, like, now that I'm, you know, like I said, further along in my career, she's like, oh, that is important that you do those things. But like, I didn't really have knowledge of a lot of that stuff. I was just trying to figure it out because my mom didn't know, which is good that I got a chance to go and did, you know, quote unquote, better, you know, had a better opportunity than she had. But then you're still kind of behind the 8 ball and just trying to figure out what the heck is going on here, you know.
Right. You get there, you don't know the rules of the game.
You
Even
know
if
the
my
rules, exactly.
got to figure it out, where to go to get this, what's the date to drop a class. Uh-oh, I don't have enough units to graduate next semester. I got to take 8 classes. Like, it's all this stuff that's coming at you because you don't have a history of like coming, you know, all of our, you know, my father and his father went to Yale, and, you know, and and, you know, yeah, it's different. Even like, you know, like Sandra was talking about the networking. I mean, when I was at Howard, I was working 25 hours a week. I didn't have time to hang out on the yard and make friends and do small talk. You know what I mean? It's like, I got to go to my job and try to get these classes done. That's about it. I can't. And even when I got to New York, and I was my dream job was to be at MTV, and I had my daughter who was 3.5 at the time, and everyone's hanging out, you know, at the end of the day, because it's New York, you know, everybody's cool in the office. They're staying till 7 or 8 at night just because they feel like it, just because they, you know, they want to. They don't have any, they're all single, and, you know, and I'm like looking at my clock, like, I gotta see what time I gotta get out of here to get this train, get back to Brooklyn. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have time to network. And that really can hold you back in life, even like a certain dinner party or being in a certain sorority and being able to just show up at an event looking fabulous. Those kind of things make people want to hire you and give you a position, you know? And I think a lot of times we don't learn about all that stuff. We're still trying to catch up to just, let's get the college degree. Maybe my parents didn't even get that. So let me get the degree. And, you know, but there's a lot more to it. You know, the society is so complex.
Yeah, I think Right before too, even like my cousin, now I think I've said this before, but she was talking about, she just got a real estate license and she was working with someone. She said that, is not unusual for Caucasian families to come to her and they got help with the down payment on the house.
Mhm.
Whereas that's
Yeah.
almost never the case when she's working with African American families, but with Caucasian families, it's not uncommon at all, even if it's 20, 30, $1,000, that's still a big come up, versus just, you're just starting from scratch yourself.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, I
I think
think, and somebody else was talking about the educational aspect, and as a school counselor who worked in Alpharetta, but then who also worked in Henry County, the differences in the way that the school counselor role varies was eye-opening. Because when I was in Alpharetta, it was all about make sure you're signing up for this ACT, SAT prep class, here where you can take it free, here where you can practice, here's what you need on your ACT, SAT. I'm organizing study things, I'm organizing college visits. Whereas whenever I was in Henry County, it was more along the lines of, okay, make a list of every single kid who's failing, 2 or more classes. You need to have intervention sessions. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing that. And then whenever a kid does come to you and they want to go to college, then you can step aside and actually talk to them about it. So I think that even just that exposure and that expectation that is set for kids based off of their demographics and their socioeconomic status, I think weighs in heavily. Because as a first generation college student coming through Griffin, like had somebody known what to tell me, I should not have student loan. Like I graduated, heavily involved with almost a 4.0 taking AP and honors classes, but yet I still have student loans because no one told me that you should be applying for these scholarships, that this can actually be free for you. And whenever you don't know better, you don't do better. And so I think that is because, DeAndre, you asked what leads to poverty, like not knowing your opportunities, not being aware of the resources available to you.
Right. You
You-
don't know
yeah.
until you got the inside club. You know what I mean? Until you get inside the club, fully get inside, you just figure there's so much more for you to learn. And I think coming out of a civil rights kind of come up mentality, we don't even get educated a lot about money and wealth and money management and saving for things because we're still in survival mode a lot of times. Going to college is a lot of people of color are going to have to work their way through. Or as Jasmine said, you don't know about the scholarships you can apply for, that you don't have to, be saddled with these loans. You just don't have the information, you know?
I think our whole system and how it's set up, it makes it very difficult to get out of the poverty cycle, and a lot of, like I said, getting rid of all kind of programs. People, middle class America and white Americans don't realize, when people talk about white privilege, they're thinking, oh, I'm not rich. How do I have white privilege? You know what I mean? And they don't realize that it's the basic things that they're taking for granted. I mean, I didn't come from that, but I can say my white privilege is the color of my skin because maybe it got me a job that I didn't realize, it did. I mean, I didn't have the financial, and just from being there and being growing up in a poor neighborhood, you see sometimes it takes generations to move up. Like several generations. You go from parents who didn't even graduate high school to maybe the next generation they're graduating high school to maybe the next generation they might start college and not finish to maybe the next generation. You know what I mean? It takes a long time when you don't have any help, and people I don't, because it doesn't affect them, they don't see it. And that keeps you in poverty. I think education really, 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 honestly, education, I think, is the key to helping people get out of poverty faster than it
What
would
kind,
normally take.
well, in that case, what type of education, but more importantly, what exactly is education? Is it what our school teach us?
No, it has to be outside of that too, because we're not getting the proper education in school. But even just having that, I mean, you have to have a, I don't know, somewhere there has to be some kind of knowledge being pushed your way that it's important to make it to the next level. It's important to go beyond what you're being taught and to read, to make reading more of a priority, because you're going to have to find things on your own because it's not being given to you.
Yeah.
But it's there. It's there if you look. But if you're not a strong reader, I mean, it's going to be very hard to get past where you are, your station in life. It's going to be very hard, and people don't realize, like, I mean, in my situation, my father had a third grade education, but he came from another country to where third grade in another country is very different than third grade in America. And looking back, he was the smartest person I know as far as like teaching you things that are important in life that he learned. But when he came to America, the American dream was already over. That ended. All of this stuff kind of ended back, I'd say, right around the civil rights movement, where, since I think there was literally a war on poverty as far as like criminalizing you for being poor. My father, when he came to America, he couldn't speak English. He never did catch on really good. And he was a cook. So he worked in a restaurant and they don't get paid. I remember my dad made like $13 an hour.
Yeah.
And the only way we survived was we were lucky enough to be in a house that wasn't ours, but nobody claimed. So we just had to pay the house taxes on and live there. So we were lucky, because if we had to pay rent somewhere, it would have been all bad. We never would have had the life we had. We were lucky.
You said your father made 13 an hour cooking. When was this? Like what time period?
It was in, I'd say, the 80s and 90s, but that was what he made towards the end after having worked at the same place for, like, I want to say he worked there for 20 years.
Wow.
So that's what he built up to. That was his end, salary, $13 an hour.
And a lot of, and I'm asking these questions because, and it does have to do with economics. A lot of the, so what happened during the time in which your father was working up to that 20-year time period, the dollar, the inflation got higher and higher, and the value of the dollar decreased, and over 95% of America's dollar has decreased because of the decision President Nixon made when he took us off the gold standard in 1971.
Right. Yeah, all of that. I mean, the whole capitalist system has led to, things being the way it was. Because like I said, in my neighborhood, there were a lot of families, Black families, that owned the house they were living in. We didn't own it. And we could have got kicked out at any minute had somebody wanted to claim it. But it saved us by being able to live there, because I don't know what would have happened had we not.
Gotcha. I know we're getting close to the end, but I wanted to also talk about, I wanted to ask questions regarding survival mode and how do we get out of that? Because there are people, because despite the number of people that come from the Black community that are disproportionately in survival mode, as we've all said, there are people that have been able to not only climb up out of that, but be able to create courses, write books, and do seminars on how people can do that as well. I wanted to ask, what will it take for our people to get out of survival mode altogether, so that what we gain can be passed to the next generation? Here's what I'm noticing: people like John Johnson, who created Ebony and Jet magazine, that when he died, he left that $600 million estate to his daughter, and now they have went bankrupt. They've ran out of money. I think some people out of Texas bought the company. The wealth that is gained within people in our community are lost within the next generation.
Mhm.
How do we get out of survival mode, and how do we not only get to that point but sustain it for generations, like people like the Rockefellers and even the Trumps and others?
Financial literacy.
I agree. Financial literacy, exposure, and education, and resources, and security. I mean, realistically speaking, we have to shift the mindset. We have spent our entire history being overly consumed with the right now because tomorrow isn't guaranteed.
Right.
And so we can justify, buying these rims or buying these $300 shoes over buying a computer because YOLO, we got to live our life today.
Right.
And I think until we get beyond that mentality, we're going to continue seeing the same things.
And
I
it
think
always amazes me too that we have an educational system that never really focuses on financial literacy for any of our youth. And that just always blows my mind away how a lot of these important life skills, we just leave it to families to teach children, but yet the families don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge. And so we just repeat those cycles over and over again.
Mhm.
But I've always told, I remember having this conversation with my cousin who's a teacher, like, I just don't get why we don't focus on certain things in school, financial literacy being a huge one of them.
Mhm.
Just teaching kids about money, opening a business, stock market, savings account, checking account. It's these very basic things so that we can help, he said, move generations and move them forward.
I think that the finish line keeps getting pushed back though. Like it's harder to reach a stable level of existence because the finish line keeps getting pushed further and further and further away. It makes it very difficult to keep up. And you're right about the financial literacy because I see it every day in my job. Kids, their parents, I mean, I have parents who are not even, their kids are getting ready to go to college, and that's when they decide, oh, I'm gonna bring my kid in to open an account when they're getting ready to go off to college. So that you're gonna let them have, that's when they're gonna start, and it needs to happen way before then because they're gonna make so many mistakes they would have already learned about had you started them before that.
Right.
So that's what they're waiting for, and then they're keeping them away from things like credit when instead you should be teaching them, but they don't know themselves still. The parents still don't know how to manage their credit, and credit in our society is so important because that's going to determine, if you get a car, and how much you're going to pay for that car, and when you can buy a house and how much you're going to pay for that house. And if your credit is poor, you're going to end up paying more for the same house as somebody else. So if no one has taught you any of these things and how the length of your credit, so if you're afraid for your kids to have credit and you're not teaching them how to manage it and what it's for and all of that, then it's going to take them even longer when they finally do establish it to build up the length of time they want to see in order to be able to take advantage of these things. It's like the poorest people are the ones that are paying the most for a car. Like I can look at one of my friends paying just about $500 a month for a Nissan Sentra. And that same car, somebody could be paying $280 a month for. But they're victimizing and treating the poorest people of our society the worst by these credit standards and no knowledge and not teaching anybody about it so that they don't fall into that trap to begin with. It's financial literacy is a key to getting out of poverty, because I've heard a lot of people say, especially in my job, like when you're trying to move up, you got to fake it till you make it. And that's something you know, if you have some knowledge about stuff like credit, that can change your position in life. But if nobody is teaching it, you know, so you're learning by failing. And then how many years does it take you to get back to that, you know, to a better point? So it's pushing the years out and out and out before you can achieve anything. And the finish line keeps getting further and further and further away.
Hey,
I
I have
agree.
nothing else.
Yeah, that we can close out on that note because we
Yeah.
just went to church. Oh man. So we have chapter 6